Welcome back to this week's episode. I'm here with Shea Fairbanks, and I got to say, this guy is another Canadian, so don't hold him against him, but just accept it. Lean into it. We're all Canadians on this episode. Everybody learn to love the accents. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, dude, it's been a while. I do know that we've crossed paths on social media before, and as it does seem to happen, a lot of my guests come from social media because just like anything else, you can hurt yourself with the tool or you can choose to use it accordingly. I choose to pick awesome human beings and have amazing conversations with them. So I wanted to chat with you because there was something that popped up on my radar that really kind of caught my attention with you, and it was sobriety. And we're going to get into why you're sober and why you believe in the sober lifestyle and how that all kind of came to a head. But that seems to be a lot of your content is built around sobriety. That must
Yeah.
be really clearly important to you. So what is the definition of sobriety to you? Because there are a lot of different definitions I'm finding out.
Yeah. Oh wow. Um, my definition of sobriety is that, and it's not from a place of calling yourself an alcoholic. I don't believe in that. I find that to be extremely negative myself. And it doesn't allow me to express myself how I feel. I am someone that definitely had an issue with alcohol, but I chose to stop drinking one day and have not had a sip of alcohol since. So sobriety to me, I don't believe it is also in counting the number of days and gamifying it. If that helps you, great. If that doesn't, then don't do it. I think sobriety would just be, in a definition, a way for me to describe one aspect of my lifestyle.
When you speak to sobriety, you're speaking specifically to alcohol. Does that carry over to you on several other substances?
Yeah, so I mean that my origin story of where I started, and we can get into that,
Hmm.
is quite long, but I can give a Cliff Notes version. But my drug and alcohol substance, I guess, strat timeline would be, I started drinking at 12 until I was 31. And then somewhere in the middle of there, kind of that 16 to 23, I used cocaine for quite
Okay.
period. But it'll be 11 years on March 17th.
It's really interesting to see what you just did there. You quantified it using days, but you just said that you don't like to quantify things using days.
It was more to see, I more or less, I know the day of when I quit
Mm,
using things, but I
got
don't know
it.
the number of, I don't keep track of, like, this is the number of days,
Got it.
1300 or whatever it is. I don't know.
Oh,
But
okay, okay.
I know the day that I last used it and the day that it was technically like the sober anniversary of
Mm,
both both substances that I've, stopped using.
fair enough. That makes sense. So let's get into why you felt I mean, drinking at 12. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like that doesn't happen. I mean, small towns in small areas. I started drinking at 14. So it's kind of the thing when there's hockey games and the woods and barn fires and all of the things of small town Canada and small town pretty much everywhere else, it feels like. But what brought you to the point where at 12 you started drinking pretty heavily?
Yeah, that, and it kind of, so starts at kind of 3 and 4, and
Okay.
then we'll work up. But 3 and 4, I was sexually abused by a bus driver, um, multiple times, and I, at the time, obviously, you know what memory I have of it is very few and far between. Obviously, I have some recollection of the trauma occurring, but I mean, I was 3 and 4 years old, so it is not, you know, it's not something, while I'm at 30, 34, going on 35 this year, it's not something I think about all the time. But it was
Mm.
definitely a moment in my life where I stuffed it as far down as I could, didn't tell anyone about it until I was much, as after age 20, or
Jesus, man.
that it was definitely not something I definitely shared with anyone. So my family didn't know about it, and no one at that school knew about it. And I went to a school in Calgary here at the time for uh, children with learning disabilities or things like that. And so most of the students at that place were definitely very mentally challenged, whether they were in wheelchairs or not. I went there as I had a speech impediment when I was growing up, and I couldn't pronounce things like my own name, like a sh type sound,
Mm.
or stop, or things like that, like where there's two consonants together. I couldn't pronounce those things, so I went to a school where I was able to learn how to speak effectively. But while there, that's where the bus driver sexually abused me in the
Can,
washroom.
can I ask a couple questions about that if you're comfortable?
Absolutely, yeah.
So you waited until you were much older to speak about it. Did your parents notice a shift in behavior? And the reason I'm asking this very truly, and this is selfishly I'm asking, is because I have
Mm.
a 7-year-old, and these are things I think about. As you can tell, the world I live in, I am chronically, this is not a laughing matter, but it's like I'm consciously aware of people and what happens when you put people in power over others that are unable to protect themselves. So did you start to show behaviors? Were there signs you didn't tell your parents? Did he threaten you so that you wouldn't tell them? I'm always curious as to what the reasoning would have been behind why not speaking. I mean, you're a child, for God's sake. You shouldn't have had to go through it at all.
Yeah, it was. I I don't remember the
Mm.
driver telling me that I couldn't tell anyone about it. I just don't remember any
Right.
conversations of that nature. I do remember, and I don't know if my parents noticed a change in my behavior. I was always a very happy child, and it's not that I wasn't happy. I think there is just like a level of shame that I
Mm,
felt myself uh, from what had occurred. Like,
mm,
and the question that I was able to come to as an adult and be able to feel into was like, why did it happen to me? Like, what made me so special that the guy picked me?
mm.
To which, as I've done a lot of work healing that, obviously the answer is there's nothing remarkably special about me that this gentleman chose to
Oh, you speak
use me.
very respectfully.
The part in the healing process I've gotten to
Mhm.
is forgiveness. So
Good for
I
you.
I forgive I forgive the gentleman for what he did ultimately to me. And I wouldn't, I it's almost weird for most people to hear it. I wouldn't say, like, I don't wish any ill upon him. I Was it wrong what he did? Absolutely. But he was acting with the the he probably
Mm.
had traumas and abuses of his own that he didn't know how to express, and that was the only way he knew to express it. And I guess I don't feel like I want him to be dead or anything like that. Like, it's not my place. And it's if I'm willing to love those parts of myself that
Mhm.
ultimately were abused, then I'm able to come to a place where I have forgiveness for the abuse happening, I guess.
Well, because it's not going to do you any good to hold on to the resentment. It's just going to make you sick and ill and angry and sad and all of the above. But was this individual caught? Was this a pattern? Did this just happen to you that you're aware of? Did this, like, was there any repercussions here to these actions?
I have no idea.
Wow.
Yeah, I do know that what happened to me, we never pressed charges. I never told anyone till I was an adult.
Right.
Um, there's no way of knowing if he's even alive by the time I shared it
Oh,
with my mom. So yeah, there's really no way of knowing what kind of transpired, or if he did that to other people.
Mm, interesting. Oh, you're a better person than I am, Shay. You are a better man than I am. So,
Well, the thing about like getting to the forgiveness piece is by getting to that spot, I'm able to, I would never want, obviously my soul in this lifetime chose to have that experience, to to have to endure it, but also to overcome it, and to use that as a lesson within this lifetime, to forgive and heal all the parts that trauma or that abuse creates, whether it's generationally or not. So
mm,
I do feel that it is something that, as unfortunate as it was to have to endure, it was something that my soul chose to experience in this lifetime.
I'm not going to push on that. That's not my place to push. So I'm going to leave that alone. Okay. So let's go into this happens. You start living your life. You start drinking at 12. Were there signs before that? Were there behaviors starting to show? And how did alcohol get into your hands at 12 years old?
Yeah, so the sexual abuse thing happened 3 to 4. My father passed away unexpectedly
Mm,
before Christmas when I was 8 years old, December 22nd. And so, and that was super out of the blue. He had a heart attack playing hockey. It's before they had defibrillators at rinks. And so that that was my best friend, the person I looked up to the most. I mean, a young boy, when you're under 10, your father is your hero. So it was definitely, that was super difficult to deal with. And so the grief of that, and obviously I never shared my sexual abuse stuff with him prior to, obviously I've told my mom now, but not, I was never able to share that with him. So that was 8. And then my mom remarried for the first time to a man that, it started kind of around when I was about 10 when they got married, but it started with kind of verbal or psychological abuse of making me feel stupid, or things like that, manipulation psychologically. And that's when kind of the alcohol ended up coming into the picture. Is I think because I carried a lot of shame from the sexual abuse side, and then the grief with my father, and then with this other man, and the kind of the first stepfather, and uh, that abuse and stuff that was kind of going on. I was definitely I would cry a lot, and I was very weak growing up. And my brothers, in an effort to make me tougher, we would do kind of like battle royale wrestling / fighting. Uh, I have an older and younger brother. I'm kind of the second oldest, and we have a sister who's younger. But in a battle royale type thing, we would all wrestle and fight each other, and we'd end up usually at a friend's house. And his dad worked in the oil patch and was rarely home. But at
mm.
12, his son would just live by himself at home,
Okay.
and fridge full of beer. And after fighting, I was told that alcohol takes your pain away, and so
Oh,
have a
Jesus.
beer and you drink it down. And it was never really like the taste. I didn't really mind it. It was more just like, I was psychologically, I guess, told by my brothers, and my older brother and my friend and stuff, that you drink alcohol and your pain goes away. So I
Mm.
drank, and then sure as shit, the pain would go away.
Mm. For God's sake. Yikes, my friend. I'm so truly sorry. That is really difficult. You said that was the first marriage. Did your mom remarry again?
She's remarried, and she's been remarried to a fantastic guy. So
Oh, good.
everything has come full circle. And my home life before my dad passed away was super harmonious and loving, and my parents were a great match. So
Mm.
I imagine had he not passed away, they'd still be together today. But
Yeah.
that's it. It's nice that my mom, is able to live a happy life with a man that truly loves her and truly loves all of us. So
That's beautiful, man. I'm really happy for all of you that that was the end result. How has that been? You start drinking, you're doing all of, the wrestling and roughhousing and all of that. But at what point, you're younger at this point, but at what point did it start to show up for you and you started to realize it was an issue? Or did it at all until you were an adult?
uh well, the abuse with this first stepfather, I guess, kind of shifted from that to more physical stuff around kind of 15, 16. And
Mm.
that's when I started using things like cocaine and stuff that tend to push, take the pain away, the mounting pain, I'd say, because it tended to get worse as time went on because I really didn't talk to anyone about anything. And so I started using alcohol and cocaine, and that definitely around kind of 16. So we're talking grade, what is that, grade 10,
Mm.
10, 11 type thing. So using that in that period definitely, and I don't know if I actually ever really realized I had an issue until, yeah, probably about like that around, well, maybe my 20th birthday. I went out and I I don't remember a single thing past 9 p.m.
Mm.
I do know that my two of my friends took me home to my mom's house. She was separated from the first stepfather at the time. And
And brought to you by Mindful Meds. You guys have been seeing me take Mindful Meds for a little while now. Mindful Meds is a premium supplement company dedicated to supplying humans with the tools to improve their mental health, clarity, and performance, all while supporting their growth along the way. Whether it's the Immunity Blend, Lion's Mane, Inspire, or Voyage, all of their products are clean, tested, consistent, and they've become a huge help in my life. I found Mindful Meds over a year ago now, and I've never looked back. Go check out their website, mindfulmeds.io, and use the code BRASS at checkout.
ended up having to call the ambulance, and I stopped breathing on my mom's kitchen floor at 1 o'clock in the morning on my 20th birthday. And so that was kind of like the first sign of like, oh, this is not normal. And then there'd be a few other times of that, or having, going to the hospital, getting my stomach pumped, or having cops be calling my mom and saying, hey, your son is on his way to the hospital. And so there are a few moments like that. And then when I tried to stop, I lived in Vancouver. I was a music producer. I was in the music industry, and there was always drugs or alcohol or both around every session, every recording session I ever did. So it was constantly around, and I didn't use cocaine anymore, but the alcohol was always there. And so I definitely used for quite a long time. And it wasn't probably until I moved back to Calgary 2018 that I started to realize I started working out and started getting into fitness, but I wasn't sleeping well. And I started to notice kind of like work stuff and relationships and patterns starting to show up in different places, whether it was work, whether it was personal or intimate relationships, friendships. Certain behavior I was starting to see certain things again and again and again. And I was like, okay, something definitely needs to shift. And so I tried getting sober in 2019? 2019 I did sober January, and that flowed into sober February. And then I believe Valentine's Day came up and I decided to go out and get after it. And so all of that went away, and I went through another tough breakup, and I realized I used that tough breakup as like a reason why I continued to drink heavier. And and then the pandemic happened, and I was at home a lot and working and drinking a lot. And then I saw a post on Facebook in like early September from a friend of mine that he had just done a 100 days sober challenge. And I messaged him, and he said, "You're competitive and you're also the biggest drunk I know. So there's no way that you can actually do this." And it kind of like struck a personal chord when someone called me out, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to try. I'll do 100 days sober. And I got the 100 days. And then I continued to tell myself, I'll get 100 days and then I'm going to go back to drinking. And I got to the end of the 100 days and I said, let's go for 6 months. And then after 6 months, I'll go back to drinking. So I got to 6 months and I pushed to a year. And once I hit the 12-month mark, my life had just shifted so much that there's just no space in my life for alcohol anymore.
It's interesting when you hear, and I'm sure this happens in America and other places in the world, but it's wild to hear you talk about cocaine in a young adolescent the way you did. And the reason I resonate with that is we had so much of that in the town I grew up in Campbellford. I know people are going to absolutely hate that I'm calling them out on this, but our hockey teams were cokeheads. Like, I have never seen anything like it. I didn't understand cocaine until, I shouldn't have understood it the way I understood it. I never tried it. I never had it was readily available. I never wanted to. I never craved it. I never thought about like, oh, I want to, I just want to try it. I was always the person who like drank beer or, whatever at the high school parties. But I got to tell you, there was, oh my God, the amount of times, and maybe this is just in my small town, but I have this small inclination that it wasn't, but the hockey guys, like the guys in the town that could do no wrong, that could speed, that could drink and drive, that could do drugs and get pulled over by the cops, but they're so and so, or they're the goalie, or they're the captain, or the whatever. And the hockey team was so good. Our years, the hockey teams were so good in high school and so good they would go, was it like CASA and OFSA and all of these, and like they could do no wrong, but then they would leave class and go, hey, who's got the shovel? And then they go behind the hockey rink midday and do coke and come back, and the teachers all knew about it. Like, this is what's wild to me. What blows my mind is the grown-ass adults in the rooms where the kids were coming back with coke on their noses. 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds. Like, some of these kids had nicknames like Drip. And the person who's listening, no, here's what's wild. The person that I'm speaking about is now in the Canadian Armed Forces and was a massive cokehead. And they were all cokeheads. And they're not going to like that I'm saying it, but you were. And that's all good. But what blows my mind is that it was like totally acceptable. It was completely acceptable. We had guys who put themselves through windshields of their cars, and there was no repercussions. The cops did nothing. Coke was everywhere. And some of these were cop kids. So what blows my mind are these small towns and the hypocrisy around, well, at least, you know what? At least they're doing it in front of the parents. Like, I can remember stumbling into my neighbor's house after drinking half of a 2.6 of tequila, and parents sitting there being like, do you need the salt? Like, it was insane that we were totally okay with this behavior. And I don't know if it was because we grew up in small towns, or they was, at least we were doing it in front of them where we were safe, or what it was. But this small town viewpoint is why people get stuck. And to be completely frank with you, the majority of those people still live in that small town and married each other and have kids there. And that's all good and well. Nobody has any issues with that. But I kind of have an issue with the fact that the grown-ass teachers in the room knew kids were going outside in their
Mhm.
cars to go do cocaine at 16 and come back in and then drive in vehicles.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Am I
I'm not
right?
even from a small town. I'm from Calgary. Like I grew up here. I mean it back then was
Smaller.
500,000 people as opposed
Yeah,
to 1 point whatever. But
right.
it still feels like a small town. Like all my friends are still here,
Right.
like from way back when, like
Mhm.
elementary school. Everyone still lives in Calgary.
It's insane to me.
It's totally crazy. And the parties, every you know, and less so with my mom. She grew up in a small town outside of Calgary. And but like on a ranch, like on a farm.
Mm,
My grandparents had a ranch, so they were kind of separate, and they had like the farm life and parties and all that. But alcoholism runs super deep on both sides of my family. And
mm.
so I do remember when I turned 18, my mom bought a keg for, like, I was having a keg party,
Right.
but it was policed by her and my stepdad at the time. And I remember like pouring out pitchers of beer because they're like, you guys have had enough. You're cut off. Like the party's out of control. And so, my mom was always, luckily my mom, and she's sober herself. She kind of quit drinking years before I did,
Mm.
but definitely because she was so health focused, especially after my father passed away, that it was like, no partying, and didn't, so I didn't, I don't think my mom knew, I don't think she now knows now about the cocaine stuff, but it was always like when I did cocaine for the most part, it would be during high school in my car at lunch. Like
Shocker.
we're gonna drive to, McDonald's, do the drive-through, eat some crappy,
Yeah.
seed oil food, and then do a couple lines of Coke on the dash of the car, and then go
Yeah.
into afternoon classes.
Yes, exactly. That's
Totally normal.
but then we did the parties too. I think on my 16th, we had this big property, 17 acres, and it's kind of fenced in. And you came in and you brought your motor home, or you brought your tents, and you dropped your keys in a bowl. And my parents were in the house, and my parents were friends with cops, and they all sat on the deck and they watched everyone.
It's
Like
crazy.
this is this is small. This is rural area. This is a lot of rural areas in Canada. And people wonder, like, well, how did you get into drinking? It was like, they bought the alcohol for us. What are you talking about?
There's always accessible, and they would,
Always.
and whether or not, they'd buy it for us, or I'd go with friends to parties, and
Right.
their parents, we'd be like, yeah, we're going to this party, and they're like, what do you need? And they'd go into the store for us and get,
Yes.
like, 2 2 6s
Yeah.
and 6 packs of beer. And it's like, there are three 16-year-old boys. They
Yeah.
do not need that much alcohol.
No. Like the amount of times I've been in a vehicle with a drunk driver going down a rural road, literally going from one person's house in Campbellford at a party whose mother was like a nurse.
Hey humans, I know you've all been seeing me drink HVMN's Ketone IQ lately. This is a game changer. Jet fuel in a bottle. I use Ketone IQ for everything in my life, whether it's running, cycling, podcasting, or just the extra boost that my brain needs. I won't lie, it helps push me to the next level in all things. I love Ketone IQ and what HVMN stands for. Go grab some shots today at hvmn.com and use the code BRASS20 and save.
Like 2 o'clock in the morning, going over the bridge to the sub shop that was the only one that was open, and all of us drunk kids walked in, and they're like, okay, yeah, we'll just serve. Like, it's just the mentality of the small town alcohol, vibe is so radically different than if you were to live, say, downtown Vancouver, or downtown, even like downtown Edmonton or something. You're not getting away with the same sort of behaviors. The cops aren't friends of your parents. They're not, the town people aren't friends of your parents. It's not the same. It's just not the same. And arguably, maybe it's safer in those small town environments, because you've got so much oversight and there are people there. and we didn't have the fentanyl crisis. You know,
That's true.
we didn't have drugs that we were so fearful of doing. I mean, again, I still never did cocaine, but it's like these guys didn't seem to be fearful of doing it. They were doing it every other day.
Yeah,
So it's
it's
this,
true.
it's kind of wild when you see how different it is in small towns. And I'm not putting them down. I'm saying what's allowed in a small town is radically different than what is saying downtown in Vancouver or downtown in Toronto on Yonge Street, for God's sakes, at those ages. It's
Mhm.
rapidly different environments. So when you got to that point with you where you started to get sober and you are now, you know, you've been sober for quite some time, did you ever feel that moment of relapse in the sense of like, do you get, I want to say, I hate that word triggered because I think it's obnoxious. Do you ever have those moments when you're in environments where you're like, oh, I could have a beer. It wouldn't be that big of a deal.
Uh, Once in a while I'll get that, and I hate the word trigger as well, but and I don't even like the word relapse. I also find it to be super negative. So I'd simply call it a data point,
Hmm.
because that's truly all it is. It's a reference point on the graph of life to say, you know, I've been in this situation before. And
Mm.
last time I was in this situation feeling this way, I chose to drink alcohol or chose to use said substance. So instead, I just use it as it's a data point so that when you're there again, you can say, well, I've been here and last time I chose to do this, so this time I'm going to choose to do something differently. But when it comes to being in a bar, like I go to bars all the time. I go and watch the hockey game. I
Okay.
spend time with friends, and most of my friends still drink. Some have obviously seen my content and tend to shift their own perspective or are working on it, whether, whatever, working on changing their relationship with alcohol. And that's kind of the way I like to word it, as opposed to necessarily getting sober. But I don't,
I like that a lot.
I find that sometimes it comes up. Like sometimes I'll be out and I'll think like, and this is the place of where I'm trying to, I think, for my own self personally, but also for any clients I work with, is getting to a place when you change your relationship with alcohol that you can get to a spot that it is your choice. You
Hmm.
understand the consequences of what happens if you do have a drink. And the consequences is in what I mean would be like, what's it going to do for your sleep? What's it going to do for your health? How, are you going to go to the gym the next day? Probably not. Am I going to eat shit food? Probably. Am I going to sleep poorly and have, a mental brain fog day? Probably. So am I willing to risk feeling that crappy for one beer on a Friday night with the guys watching the really crappy Calgary Flames lose? Or or maybe I'll save that for down the road when I'm on a wine tour in Napa Valley with my future wife. Like
Right.
maybe that will enhance the experience as opposed to just drinking for the fun of it on a Friday.
I couldn't agree with that more. I really do love your perspective and how you view sobriety. And the reason I say that is because like you said, they're data points. And I understand there are two types of viewpoints on sobriety. You're completely sober, or you're sober because you're completely sober because if you have a drink, it will turn into a very rapid downturn drinking all day situation for some people. And then there's the people who choose to be sober, which is I don't drink anymore. I stopped drinking last year. And I chose to do that because I found that my brain didn't work as well. And I already struggle enough with the TBI issues. So it wasn't helping me. And I actually had a particular moment that I remember. And I don't drink even now, even before then. Yeah, I'm like a twice a month glass of wine person when we go out for dinner. But Dallas and I were in Toronto together, and I had a press event the next day, and we went to the Fairmont and we had a whiskey, just a whiskey, and it was awesome. The experience was amazing. That was the enhanced moment. There are moments like yesterday I was sitting with Mike Baker. I said, when you come up in June, there will be whiskey and steak and we will rant. Like it can
Yeah.
enhance, and I understand how it's used, but For me, I did find the next day, I went to this incredible opportunity in which I should have been insanely grateful to be at, and yet I was moody and miserable and didn't want to be there. So it just drastically lowered the vibrational state of my human experience, and which caused me to then not appreciate and have gratitude for being in that position. That being said, I want to ask you an interesting question that some people, it's really it's wild their answers and how different they are. So go with me on this.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you view how do you view the 12-step program where it tells you that you're always an addict forever?
This is an interesting one. I actually had this
is.
conversation on the weekend with a guy who is a recovery coach, and I want to very blatantly state I am not a recovery coach. I'm not certified as a recovery coach, and I don't do that type of work.
Right.
That would, in my, getting sober for a lot of people, if they have a dependency on alcohol to that degree, getting sober requires going to treatment and doing it with medical professionals, giving you, drugs and things to help you get off of alcohol, because it is super dangerous.
It is very dangerous. Yes. I'm glad you brought that up.
To do it the way that I did it is not the way that everyone can do it. And I have family members that have been to treatment, and I have other members of my family who chose to get sober like I did, without treatment and without AA and without the 12-step program. And it's not to say that the one is better than the other, because I totally do believe that it is such a unique experience for every single person that goes into it. I think in my own personal experience, going to AA or the 12-step program never really resonated with me because of, I don't like to stand up and say, hey, my name is Shea Fairbanks and I'm an alcoholic. I want to stand up and say, hi, my name's Shea Fairbanks, I'm a non-drinker. Like, that's how I feel. But if I were to say that in an AA meeting, they'd be like, no, you're an alcoholic. Like, but I'm not an alcoholic.
But I'm not.
I've gotten to a point where I've changed my relationship with alcohol. And when I chose to quit in the first place, I definitely had an issue. I was going down that road, but I got to the fork in the road where I could choose to get sober then, or I could continue down and probably have to go to treatment.
Right.
And I got to that fork in the road, and I had a moment of clarity and said, you know what? It's probably in my best interest to take the road towards sobriety now, which I did. And so it's not to say that there's one way or the other, or that someone has to go to AA or someone has to go to treatment in order to be sober, because I didn't. And it clearly shows that you don't need to do it. So I guess my answer with the 12-step program, I think it's a fantastic tool, and it does work for a lot of people, and a lot of people do resonate with it. Same with AA. But for myself personally, it never really fit what I was trying to accomplish. So
when I was doing my addiction and psychedelic integration program, this is something that I think you might find fascinating. We go through every single option in terms of addictive behavior, and then options for treatment and how we would handle somebody, where we would send them, what do they classify? Is it a drug? Is it an alcohol? Which one would sit better for them? Which one has the, best results for that? All of the nuances that happen when somebody is going through a moment in their life where they need some extra support. Totally. And the thing that blew my mind a little bit, and I didn't fully grasp or understand the 12-step program until this moment, and it kind of jarred me. And the reason it did was because there's so much success. I have so many friends who have had serious amount of like life-changing, saving success. And then there was an individual in the group in our 100-person class. And when you said to him, but you're not an alcoholic anymore, you were, he got very angry. Like, he became the label he gave himself, to the point in which when you brought new evidence forward saying you were an alcoholic 15 years ago, you are a sober human now. And we planted him in the reality that is this present time. He could not remove, because the statements made there as once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And here, and that's what bothers me about that statement is it doesn't take into account the brain and the neuroplasticity and the changing that's happening and the neural connections that have been made to help mitigate that, which can show that you had alcoholic abuse to the brain, but it has since healed. It also shows you that and holds you in that place so that you and your mindset can never heal. And it also makes you reliant on others to stay healed. And then it devoids you of responsibility by handing it over to God when you should be holding your responsibility and walking with God, not saying he's taking it off of me. I'm doing the work. He is giving me the strength to do the work. And so the response showed me that people attach themselves to the labels that we are, and we are the stories we tell ourselves. I had this happen yesterday, and this is why I'm bringing it up, because I think this program has saved more lives, more of my friends' lives than anything else. But I struggle with it because what if you're not a religious individual and you do not resonate with God? What if that is not something that you can get behind? What if you are a different religion and you need the AA program? Now you're giving yourself up to a God that maybe doesn't resonate with you, doesn't sit with you. I just have always been a big believer that if you keep one foot in the past, you can never fully start walking in the present.
Totally.
And I know that's controversial, but I'm not saying the program's bad. I'm just saying I don't love that we tell people that they're sick forever.
Yeah.
You can heal from these things and you can move forward in these paths and you can still use AA.
Yeah. I went on my, I guess, 3-year anniversary this past year.
Okay.
So it's September 10th is the day that I was like my sober anniversary. And it was 3 years this past year. And I have a kind of friend mentor who is over 50 years sober. And I shared that it was coming up on my 3 years. And he said, do you want to come to my meeting with me? And I said, I'm not really fond of the meetings. From that perspective of, I'm not, it's not that I'm not religious because I believe in God, but I also believe in the quantum. So, I'm spiritual. I was raised in a household where we'd go to church and it was, Christianity. It was a United Church in Calgary, and I've been baptized and I follow in the words of God. But at the same time, we were also raised on Ralph Waldo Emerson and Stoicism and spirituality and Buddhism and meditation and all kinds, and then things like Dr. Joe Dispenza and the quantum physics and stuff. So I find it challenging for myself to go to a meeting that preaches like, Jesus Christ and God is your savior. They are supporting you in being, as an alcoholic in getting sober. And it's like, well, no, I'm doing it. I'm doing the work myself. And at the end of the day, I am God myself, me, and you are God yourself. And God exists within each of us. And that is God from, whatever point of reference that is to you.
Right. It's energy.
And so, it's energy. So it's not, this is I've had this conversation with so many people about this, and I find it very interesting that the religion piece comes into sobriety quite often, and that it's almost forced upon people. And that in order to go to AA or to follow the 12-step program or things like that, you have to be going to church as well. And I just don't. I watch YouTube church once in a while when I feel up for it on a Sunday, if I'm having a slow Sunday, and other times maybe I'll meditate for 45 minutes instead.
Right. And so that right there in itself is, I would say, very similar to the way that I call myself a recovering Catholic. when you don't make decisions and you're just told, that's not a choice, that's forced upon you. And
Yeah.
it's not that it's wrong, but we're individual people. We, as we become older, we can make these decisions. I had a friend of mine whose family was heavily Jehovah's Witness, but you get baptized, I think around 10 when you make that decision. And she didn't make the decision, so she isn't. But I know that for me, I was born, I was baptized. We walk through the path. We do the communion, the white dress, the up, down, we do the whole thing. We do the Catholic schools, we do the uniforms, we do all of these things. And, we tell people, that you're a bad person if you don't. And it's really nuanced, and it's really hard because that's not, to me, what God is. As a grown adult, once I've discovered God in myself and within all of these amazing things around me, the trees, the birds, the ground, the ocean, the sky, the mountains, this is God to me. And when we tell somebody they're doing it wrong, you're praying wrong, you're doing it wrong. Well, I asked this to a lot of my religious friends. You go to church on Sunday? They're like, yeah. I said, why do you go to church? And they said, well, because we go to church to talk to God. And I said, but I understand the community aspect of being at church. I think that's one of the biggest contributing factors to a lot of people's downfalls in their lives is a lack of community. And community comes often, or has in the past, from religious components. And church is a massive community. But I have always been the person, and this is why I think you are a much stronger person than I am, Shea, and I'll tell you why. Because you're able to forgive things that I cannot forgive. And I won't. And I'm okay with that. But they never directly happened to me, but they happened to a lot of my friends. And in saying that, I can't go walk into a building that I know condones or accepts behavior, or just shifts the person to the next parish. So for them to do it to others.
That makes sense.
And so for me, I've been able to forgive myself and how I stopped God from being in my life for how negative I viewed it. And now I don't view God attached to that church at all. I view God as the sky and the ocean and the trees and the breeze, and all the people I surround myself with are filled with God. So I ask these people, why can't you just sit in contemplation in your own home and talk to God? And a lot of them can't answer that question. But I do believe, I think a lot of it comes down to community. There is a lack of community, and it is a direct correlation to people feeling alone and sad and depressed. But we're only seeing that in North America. We're only seeing that in the West. It's not like that everywhere else.
So true. I find my community, I'd say, would extend into the people that I surround myself with when we're doing hard things together from a human
1000%.
performance perspective. Like when we're in the sauna at 220 for 25 minutes, doing breath work together,
slow roasting your insides,
slow roasting, or getting into the ice bath, or jumping into a freezing cold river. Like that's my community. Or going to CrossFit, or going to the gym, and talking to pretty much every single person there that I know. Like that's the community for me. And that's
church.
That's church for me. That's living in my highest peak optimal performance.
The most aligned self.
Exactly.
That's really beautiful. I wanted to pry about this, but I try to be very respectful, because I am understanding that what works for people works for people. And I will never judge. I don't believe in judging. This is where I differentiate from a lot of the people I was raised around, where they preach the word of God and then judge. I'm not judging. I will never judge. Whatever works for anybody works for somebody. And I just want people to heal. I just struggle so much when we tell people that you're doing it wrong because you're not doing it my way. And so I'm always curious about others who have walked the path of sobriety and how they feel about it in terms of, what we just discussed. So I appreciate your willingness to have that, because some people just immediately get their back up and are like, no, that's just not reality. I'm like, well, perception is reality.
Yeah. And that it's interesting. It's something I've found, this religion, religious piece has been coming up more and more frequently in my circles. I chose not to get the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I find within that community, if you chose not to get the thing, but you're spiritual, you're seen as like less than. Because if
Yes.
you didn't get the
Yep.
thing, you also have to go to church and be this hardcore Republican, pro-Trump mega person, but you can't also just believe that, you can't have your own beliefs upon politics or upon
Mm.
freedoms. Like, I don't know, I literally had this conversation on the weekend with the same guy that told me that kind of the stuff that I do as a performance coach is not recovery and not sobriety. And I said, well, I'm not a recovery coach.
I was just gonna say.
And I said, I'm a human performance coach, like human performance specialist. And I use a lot of different tools. And you had one of my heroes and mentors on,
Who's
Gabby
that?
Reese.
Yep. Oh,
And
yeah.
I did the XPT stuff, and I coached alongside them in Costa Rica in 2022.
Mm.
And so using things like breath work and movement and how you recover and how you connect with people and all of those things that XPT and Laird and Gabby do so incredibly well are the
Mhm.
things that I like to bring into my coaching. And it's just really interesting when someone says, this is how, if you're going to be working in the field of sobriety with people, you need to do things this way. And it's like, well, no, there's just as there's as many different ways to get sober, like I did and he did and my family members who are sober did, that there's just as many different ways to coach people upon sobriety.
There, 1,000%. I have a couple clients right now who have chosen to become sober just due to their own, they're just seeing behaviors and how it's affecting their life. And it's been a real blessing to watch them walk this path and see what comes up and get to witness and drive people down the right direction. And it's never been that I've found individuals are not able to do it. It's that it is a really terrifying unknown. And it is much easier to walk into the unknown with a flashlight than it is to walk it alone.
Big time. Big time. Yeah, with a lot of things, I tend to take the road less traveled, and I'm totally okay doing that. I actually thoroughly enjoy going down that road into the unknown and stepping into it by myself. But having someone to join you on that journey definitely makes it significantly easier.
Of course, because it's not devoiding you of your own responsibility. It's helping to provide accountability, which is a little bit different. And that's where I see a lot of people have success, is when you're able to show them that they can do it on their own. And in the moments of difficulty, they can have a support there to kind of walk with them. And I think that's where, again, AA works for people, is if they don't have support networks that can, or are sober, or that can provide the tools. Because I think that's the biggest differentiator from, say, when these programs, because there's a lot of programs, there is, I didn't realize how many options there were until I did this schooling. And what I realized in that is that there was versions, just slight deviations into all the program, but they were all had a similar path. And what I saw with them was an inpatient would be a certain amount of time, and then it would bring a person back to the similar environment. And most of the time, unless it's something quite severe, I don't know that people need to be inpatient. They need people around them. They need their fish tank that they live in to be clean. But if you're constantly taking a healthy fish and putting it into a sick fish tank, you're going to get the same result. And so people just don't have others around them that are maybe sober, or community that has the tools to help them. But if you're lucky enough to just have family members who've maybe walked the path or have experienced it, they can then provide them with all the tools they have at their disposal. And that could be enough to get them to the other side. And if it's not, that's when I believe the other programs can come into place. But I think it's just a lack of support in people's lives, because we have, as a culture, have uplifted alcohol. We have used alcohol as an acceptable tool for social anxiety and depression management and for pain management. Just go have a beer after work. Work was hard. Have a beer. Your wife standing home in the 70s in her cute little dress and your little martini. Like, think Mad Men, it's just sit down and have a whiskey, sit down and have a conversation. And they can, again, be enhancers. But it is funny how when I sit down at a nice restaurant with a big steak and I'm sitting there and they go, "Do you not want some alcohol?" And I go, "I don't drink." And they go, "Why?" It is the looks that you get. It's the only thing in the world that when people will give you a look like you have a problem if you don't do it. And it is very similar in other spaces as well, right? So it's not just alcohol. It can, trickle into other substances. And if you're not participating, it's almost like there's something wrong with you.
Totally. It reminds me of something Chris Williamson said on, I can't remember who he was on. He was on some podcast and someone asked him about sobriety. And he said, it's so weird that when you tell someone you don't drink, they say like, "What's wrong with you?" But if they, and then his quote would be like, if someone said, "Hey, I'm not using heroin anymore," it's not like someone's going to be like, "Hey, why don't you want to use heroin?" They're going to be like, "No, congratulations."
Right. But
Whereas
it's state sanctioned. That's why.
Yeah. And so it's this thing of, and I still get it. Some people, luckily now I have quite a large community of sober people around me, as whether it's acquaintances, people from the gym, people that are, pushing themselves at CrossFit or pushing themselves in, whatever their thing is. A lot of my friends who are runners don't drink. That is just, I think it's just something when I got sober, it was like, I need something to fill the time. So I started running. And it was the middle of the pandemic and I couldn't do anything anyway. So it worked out really well in that regard. But it's also just a lot of my friends that don't drink, it sounds and seems like most of them found running or CrossFit or something that ends up taking a lot of someone's time in terms of human performance. They're already doing something for their mindset and their health from a sobriety standpoint, but now they're using that time to fill it into something that's, creating positive change in their life. And so, yeah, that's just it's definitely looked down upon when we don't drink. And I went out with a friend the other day on a weekend night. I almost never do, but just because I get tired at about 10 p.m. as a sober person, especially
I go to
being
bed
around,
at 9. Don't worry.
Yeah, especially being around drunk people in a bar, you're like, this sucks
Yeah.
so much. And I hate all of you right now. So I'm going home. But going out with a friend and I said, let's go out and go sober. And he was like, well, what are we going to use to, get into the flow state? And the thing that I use, I make little cocktails with the ketone IQ and soda water, like a performance cocktail that's going to allow you to have energy and focus, mental clarity, and get that like flow state access, similar to the buzz feeling you get when you have a beer anyways. And it said, let's just have this. I mixed up with some electrolytes and we went out to the bar and he's like, I feel so good right now. I was like, yeah. This is called normal life.
This is what it feels like to not drink poison.
This is the human
fuel
experience.
your body. Yeah. And fuel your body. It's pretty amazing. It's funny too, because Michael, I remember when we were with him, he was showing me some of his water he makes and what he puts in it. And I was like, I'll just take the shot. I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't want to taste it all the time. I don't want to have to taste the ketones all the time. I know the taste of them. I know them well. I take them daily. I'm consciously aware. I just want to get it in and we're going to live our life and we're going to go have a good time. But that's the nice part, is there are alternatives to helping change the mindset and to helping improve the energy in the room. And it makes a drastic difference when you're open-minded to trying something different. And that is the biggest shift I found is people live with blinders on and they tell themselves, I can't do it because I won't do it because of this. You can do absolutely anything you choose. You could stop AA and you could start believing in yourself to the extent in which you and your belief and your conversation with God has the potential to be strong enough. Some people don't believe they can do it without going and being held accountable. But self-accountability, I believe for most people, is there. I just don't know that they've been given an opportunity to show themselves or prove to themselves that they are capable. And some don't want to. And that's completely okay as well. Completely okay if you don't trust yourself to do that. But I would encourage people to try to put responsibility and accountability on yourself. That radical accountability, not extreme ownership, radical accountability towards self. And I think when you're able to do that, when you're able to lean into it, regardless of what you've overcome, you will show that you will show yourself how much stronger you truly are when you lean on yourself. There doesn't mean that there aren't others around you. And I'm very careful to say that some people need to have accountability outside of themselves to hold themselves in accountability. But I believe a lot of people hold themselves back by not believing that they can do it on their own or with a community or just with one other person to be accountable to.
Yeah.
I know that's
totally
controversial. I know it's controversial and I mean it out of respect, but I see so many people that keep telling themselves that they're sick and they're not.
Yeah. And it's choosing in that moment, choosing to hold yourself accountable to your own word. Once you do that a few times and you continue to do it, you now have integrity. And when you have self-integrity, you're unwilling to compromise that no matter what. I feel it like so true. And it comes down to, I ran my first ultra marathon last year. I ran 50K and there was a moment near the end, like near the final, like I'd run 42 and I got down to the final aid station. My feet were bleeding and blistered and I felt like all hell. And the race director was there and he said, do you want to ride out? Because I was like limping going in. And I said, no, I'm good. Like and I relate it back to the alcohol piece in that moment, it brings me back to the beginning of the race. I told myself I'm going to complete this no matter what.
Right.
So I was like, I'm completing this, whether it takes me 6 hours or whether it takes me 4 days, I'm going to complete this race no matter what. And so having that, being in integrity to my word, to myself, that no matter how much pain I'm in, pain's temporary. I'm going to fight through it. I'm going to move on to the other side. And it's same thing with, sobriety and when I chose to quit and where I kind of still find myself, like if I have that temptation to have a drink, then I ask myself, like, is it going to enhance my experience? No. Okay. Then is having a drink going to take me out of integrity to myself? And if the answer is yes, then it's like, well, then I know the simple answer for myself is to say no. Like it's the self accountability. Say this is something I made to myself. This is like a conviction that you make to yourself.
And that's what I love. You're not giving it to someone else. You're putting the responsibility on yourself. And when you say, will it take me out of integrity? I think that's really beautiful because when I hear people say, if I don't go, I will drink. You are the stories you tell yourself. So if you say out loud, I will, if I don't, you are setting yourself up for failure.
Totally.
Am I wrong? Am I missing something there? Like, am I being insensitive?
No, I don't think so. Because, and the mind, if I know anything about kind of law of attraction and that stuff that I've studied, if you tell your body, like, I will drink if I don't, your subconscious mind does not know how to program the word don't. It will only hear, I will drink if I like
Don't X, Y, and Z.
don't go, whatever.
Mhm.
So it will hear, I will drink. And then it will put you you will find yourself in a circumstance where you have the opportunity to have a drink and you will go through with
will.
it. But if you
Hmm.
tell yourself, like if you say, I don't have clients or I don't have money, your mind won't hear don't. It will say, I have money. It will say, I do have that. I do have this.
Mhm.
It's
That's
just,
the I am conversation, right?
yeah, I am
That is this,
conversation.
yeah, the subconscious. This comes into your coaching, and this one I want to get into here. So you are a coach, you are a human performance coach, you do work with individuals, you do optimize health, you do help amplify success, and you do embrace these different modalities and healing for optimal performance. So let's talk a little bit about that and why you've been successful in that, because I think one of the biggest differences in the coaching profession now, and you're seeing this left, right, and center. There's this amazing human being called Lauren. She goes by Lauren Love, and she's on social as well. And I absolutely love her. We're having her on soon. She's fantastic as well. But she talks really ruthlessly about the coaching space. And she says, look, if your coach is telling you X, Y, and Z, run. If your coach is acting this X, Y, and Z, run. Everybody thinks they're a coach. These 25, 30-year-old people think they're coaches while having no life experience, no walking any sort of path, but they've read a million books. That doesn't make you a coach. That means you're reverberating information. A coach is somebody, in my opinion, who has walked a path, a difficulty of some way, and has not only found the way out, but has learned all the wrong ways to do it and direct somebody into the right direction. So for you in coaching, it seems like you have lived a very, if I'm being completely honest with you, a life I wouldn't wish on any child. And I think I say that because I want you to know that, and I know you know this as an adult, but in the mother in me needs to say that, at no point in any way, shape, or form, and I know you know this, but I'm really truly just speaking to the 7-year-old Shea, you fucking know this had nothing to do with you, right?
Mm-hmm. Big time. Thank
Good.
you for saying that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't wish my experiences upon anyone else. And as I mentioned earlier, my soul chose to have these experiences. The weird thing is I don't wish that I didn't have them, because that they've made me who I am.
Well, and that's the conversation of regret. And this world is happening for you, not to you.
Mm-hmm.
It's the perception and how you choose to see it. As horrific as the things are, they can be the catalyst points to being great.
Big time.
But it's how we choose.
Yes.
Yes.
100%. Yeah.
So
when it comes to the coaching stuff, yeah, I actually had a conversation with a new client yesterday, and he said, I'm already sober, and I've been doing this stuff, and I'm working out, and I'm doing all the kind of human performance areas. He said, I've done journaling. I'm not like a rookie. I'm not starting at ground zero type thing with all of this stuff. And I've done breath work, and I've done meditation, and I have a relationship with God. It's my own relationship. And I said, that's great. You have all these things. I said, so where do you see the biggest value shift between yourself and myself? And he says, the fact that you've lived the life you've lived allows me to know that you look at things with a different perspective than literally every other coach out there.
Exactly.
And I was like, I've never had anyone say it that way, but that sounds beautiful. So thank you.
Your lived experience is your resume.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
Or like the other way of saying is your mess is your message. And I don't even look at my things as a mess, but it is my message of getting sober and my perspective of doing so and healing trauma and abuse and all the reasons why I drank in the first place, but also the reasons why I continue to look at, I am currently eating this carnivore diet. The reasons I eat a carnivore diet is because my blood work has never been better. And I look at things like my father passing away of of a heart attack at age 35 and say,
Yeah.
how can I live to be 150?
Mm.
And it's things like, oh, well, I better start working on that human performance pretty quick if I
Mm.
want to get there.
How do you feel going into your 35th birthday?
Oh, that's something that's actually, it's come up a few times
I
in
can
different
imagine it
podcasts and
has.
different conversations. And I actually don't know if I have an answer. It
Okay.
feels so surreal to be turning 35. And it's not to compare myself to where my father was. He had 4 children, working on his PhD, working, a few jobs to make ends meet. My mom and him, they were both in school
Mm.
while we were being raised. So it's not to compare myself, and my life is completely different from that. But knowing that he made 35 years, it's just something I almost can't even put into words. Like
Yeah.
it feels so strange to be turning the same age as my father when he passed away, and to reflect on life and what, the experiences that I've had and I've done and what I've been through.
I have a similar friend. Her mother passed away very young when she was young, and she became a mom real quick.
Mm,
And she has a similar outlook. It's the stark reality that most people don't face. They are fortunate to have parents that grow older, and you watch them grow older and you go through all of that. But to have a parent ripped away at a young age, at 35, 40, even 45, we're talking about, people are, we have the knowledge to live longer. We have the tools at our disposal, but just based on the way we're raised or the lack of information or the data, we have unhealthier lives, or we don't check things. And it's because, let's be realistic, like this human performance side of life and this biohacking and blood work draws and all of these are so new and it's so fresh. And we would be remiss to not grab every piece of data at our disposal and use these as blueprints to move forward, to have these incredible lives that the people that we loved just didn't get the opportunity to experience.
totally. And so he had blood work done before his death, like about a month before his death, and his cholesterol numbers were fine, and he didn't drink, he didn't smoke,
Mm.
he was healthy. He worked out multiple days a week, but he had a lot of stress. He had 4 kids and school and multiple jobs and a mortgage and all kinds of other things. So you add up all the things, but when we look at it, when I look at it more in depth, he was probably gluten. I'm celiac, so he was probably either
Mm.
celiac or gluten intolerant of some form. So there's inflammation in his body from that, from eating bread and gluten. And he was lactose intolerant. I'm anaphylactic to dairy, so I received some parts of
Right.
the genetic information. And so there's massive inflammation from dairy and gluten already within his story, and he's not drinking and not smoking, but he has a ton of stress mixed with inflammation. And it kind of just, in my mind, creates a perfect recipe for something to happen. Whether or not your cholesterol numbers are fine is not like,
It's completely irrelevant.
it's not the metric that it used to be. And especially now that I'm, eating carnivore and getting blood work and seeing my data show up from a blood work perspective, being like, you my doc saying, your LDL and HDL are fantastic. Like your
Yeah.
cholesterol numbers are absolutely fantastic. So I wouldn't have anything to worry about. But I went to a new functional medicine doctor when I was living in Costa Rica, and he did some other tests, some other blood work, and found that there is one thing that may or may not have been the
Mm.
cause for my father's passing away at 35 of a heart stuff that I would never have looked for. And it's the uh, platelet stickiness
Mm-hmm.
within the bloodstream. And I never ever had anyone test for that until I had it tested. And he was like, this is what you need to do. And so I started taking some like nutritional supplements to work on that. And one of the things I found to be the best work for that is eating beef liver. And so I've had beef liver capsules. I hate the taste of it. So I take the capsules anyways. So I had that, and I noticed in the most recent blood work that the stickiness of the platelets is they're a lot smoother now. So things are trending in the right direction. But if it wasn't like, as you said, with biohacking and all the access to data and access to tools that are at our disposal, like, you'd be absolutely insane to not take every single thing you possibly can and try it out, test it out. I do a lot of self biohacking testing of things on myself, and I find myself a perfect guinea pig for a lot of that stuff, of which then I share with my clients.
My husband is the same, and we had to do it because Canada wouldn't treat any of us for our TBIs during COVID. And so my husband became a radical researcher in ways that I just completely just shocked my brain. He's so intelligent, but to see the data collection and the availability. And it's funny, I'm glad you bring up inflammation, because I don't know if you've ever heard of Dr. Mark Gordon, but he is one of the leaders in treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder. He's down in the United States. He's been on Rogan a handful of times. I highly recommend you check him out. He has an incredible organization and a wild blood test that he has developed with an AI program that literally it catches things that normal blood work, normal testing, even more advanced testing doesn't catch. And it's because it directly looks at them in correlation to each other and how that works. And we understand, he has a different belief in PTSD than I do, but he believes it's not real. He believes it's an inflammatory disease, which we do understand between cytokines, and we do understand between your homocysteine levels. We can check and see a lot of these issues, and high inflammation from foods, from glutens, from having things in our bodies that just shouldn't be for certain people, depending on the blood type and how their body reacts, is going to have a massive repercussion to your long-term health. And you may not see it now, but you will eventually see it. And by the time you see it, it's going to be really hard to reverse. And inflammation in the body is a straight up killer. Just absolutely different when your levels are lower. You can feel it in the head, you can feel it in the joints, you can feel it in how your body heals. You can feel it when you get sick. And so inflammatory issues are something I always encourage people to go and find out what your levels are. And for people that are like us that are in Canada, I understand that the doctors don't want to test for a lot of these things. And I'm also very conscious that your doctor more often than not will not test your testosterone or your free testosterone, and they will not test you for things like omegas or vitamin D, but you can ask for it. There is a billing code. You will just have to pay at a Life Labs for it, and you can get the results. And if you're not sure, how to determine or understand, you can pop them into Inside Tracker. It is very cheap. It is very easy. It is not that difficult. So when people say to me oh my goodness, when they say to me in Canada that, well, it's really just difficult, go into a walk-in clinic, ask for the things you need, go in and get your blood drawn, plug it into Inside Tracker. You just have to be proactive, and you have to be somebody who's willing to take action.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have a private doctor in Calgary.
Yep.
I don't know why. I don't want to get into the conversation of public health care.
Don't. Dr. Mike Hart's episode with me just dropped today, so we went hard in it for you.
Okay, good, because I can't stand public health care in Canada, and everyone outside of Canada is like, well, you guys have free health care.
You guys have free health care.
I don't want to get into it. We definitely don't have free health care. But paying for private health care is a significantly better approach. And when I pay for it, I can, not only do I not have to go to a public lab, which I hate, I can go right to his office, and they take it out right there, that day. And I can get my results over the phone, which is significantly better than having to book an appointment, go in and go through the data myself. Like, send me the data, I'll go through it on the phone with you. There's that, but any testing I want done, I can just ask for it. And almost, I'd say 9.5 times out of 10, he will go through with it.
Right. Yeah.
He'll ask me why, but if I give him a valid reason, then he'll test for it.
Right. And if you don't have a valid reason that your doctor doesn't deem valid, you can go give Dr. Mark Gordon a call. and he'll do it for you.
There's
There's
ways
a
to do
way.
it. And
Everything.
if it's not in Canada, you know, when I was in Costa Rica, I could get whatever I wanted done. So
Yeah, that's how that works.
Yeah.
It's amazing what happens when we are allowed to look after our own bodies. When we become healthy
Totally.
individuals, what starts to change around us, who starts to change around us, and this awakening that happens within ourselves about the accountability. When you take it, when you grab it, and you're radically accountable for your health and your well-being, everything around you begins to change. And I'm
Big
really
time.
grateful that you are a coach that is preaching these modalities and these lifestyle shifts, not to tell anyone that they're doing it wrong, but to show them that they can uplift themselves and they can be better with the tools they have at their disposal, and they can make radical choice.
Totally. And that's, you know, one of the biggest things within my coaching, and especially when it comes to the way that I train physically or what I put into my body from a diet perspective. I don't share that with, like, I'm not telling someone they have to go carnivore.
No.
I will give, if they're interested, I'll pass the same research and resources I did for myself. And I listened to a lot of podcasts and I read a ton of papers on it. And I did a lot of self research before I chose to go through with it. And then I
Right.
decided to implement it myself. But if someone's interested, I will share the resources that I used myself. Happy to do so, but not, I would never tell someone like, hey, this is what you need to do. You need to use CrossFit as your only method of training, or you need to do this, or you need to do that. Like, this is what's worked for me. These are the results I've seen. Now, obviously you are your own person, so your results may differ from what I experienced.
Isn't that amazing how you allow people to think for themselves?
It's
Oh,
this world is exactly that. It's meant for self responsibility of our own decisions, choices, etc.
man,
And the coaching space is just such a, there's so many people that call themselves a coach, and I struggle with this myself of like, do I have enough certifications to call myself a coach? And I look at people like, you know, the people I look up to in the coaching space. My mom is a certified executive leadership coach. She has a master's in leadership. She is a coach for like that traditional executive coach, and has been for a very long time from a professional standpoint. So I kind of come from that side of it of like, you need to be certified, you need to have this, you need to have that. You look at other people that maybe aren't certified that are massive in the coaching space. I look at Tony Robbins. He isn't necessarily certified, but when someone, you know,
makes enough noise.
makes enough noise and have been doing it long enough and have also endured childhood experiences and life experiences that you would want to learn from, then maybe that person's actually a coach.
Right. Yeah, I fully agree. I know a lot of people have done certifications that have no business talking or teaching anybody how to handle their shit when they go home to a bottle of wine and McDonald's. So, you know, I think it's all about showing up and being who you are, who you say you are. And that comes from that radical accountability again. And that has to be on yourself as much as you put it onto others. It has to be on yourself, because we go into these professions because we are people who have been hurt in some way, shape, or form. And it will make you or break you. It will be the mask for you, or it will be the thing that sets you free. And the
Big
people
time.
that get the opportunity to coach are the people I surround myself with. I consider every single one of those coaches to be very solid in what they do, and the amount of things I've been able to garner while helping others. You're helping heal a part of yourself. And that is the most beautiful experience, is when you see someone go through something that you almost just experience very, very close to, but you know the power in that moment. You know, you can feel it, you can smell it, you can touch it, it is in your bones. And then when you see somebody else take it and thrive with it, it's like watching magic in a bottle. It's
big time.
It's unbelievable. It's an addicting feeling to watch people heal. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, that's pretty much the best way to put it. Yeah, watching someone create, you know, optimize their health and create their dream life is like, wow, that's powerful.
There's nothing
It's
better,
like,
man.
there's literally nothing better.
There's
And
nothing.
I've had some jobs, some careers, some things in my life that, you know, whether it's corporate sales or being a music producer, like there are some things that are beautiful in that space as well, but there's still nothing like someone realizing like, this is my potential. Oh, wait, I can do that. Okay, I'm going to go do that.
So I'm going to tell you a quick story before we go, because I think you'll appreciate it.
Okay.
I got to coach on this Not Dead Yet retreat 3 weeks ago now. And
Oh, nice.
there was this incredible woman who was 300 pounds, and we were going to climb Mount Helena or Helen. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but in Montana.
Mm-hmm.
And she had worked really hard on herself to get herself to that retreat. And her whole goal, this was completely unbeknownst to me, was to get to the top of this mountain.
Wow.
And the group took off, and just naturally by fluke, I end up just walking with her. And I didn't know her. I never got a chance to really talk to her that night before we did it, or hear the goal of like, hey, I want to climb this mountain, any of those things. Anyway, and we're walking, and she broke down within 5 minutes. She goes, I can't do this. There's no way I'm getting my body on the top of that mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at her and I got down to her level and I said, can I be brutally fucking honest with you right now? Like ruthlessly honest. She didn't know me from a hole in the wall. So she has no idea what she's, okay. Took her sunglasses off her face. I said, take some breaths with me. So we did some breath. And then I looked at her and I said, if you keep telling yourself that you cannot do this, you will never do this. And she looked at me. I said, you need to erase that word can't from your vocabulary right now. It does not exist. This is a choice. You're making the choice to stand still.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there on, we did 10 steps at a time. And it took us over 3 hours. But when she got to the top of that fucking mountain, Shea, I cried with her because I was so insanely proud of what the human mind can do when you give it the tools, when you give it the people, when you give it the fucking support it needs to thrive. And when she came back down that mountain and we walked back into the house, I said, I'd like you to reintroduce yourself. And she walked in and she said, hi, I'm so-and-so. I'm a fucking mountain climber. And to watch that room of 40 people stand up on their feet and hold her in that container and show her that she is more than capable of the things she tells herself.
Mm-hmm.
That was it for me.
That would definitely get me.
There's nothing like watching someone reach their potential when they thought there's no chance in any point in their life would they ever be able to do that.
Yeah.
It's everything, man. It's everything. If people could understand what it means to truly be a support network for someone,
Mm-hmm.
everyone would do it.
100%.
Yeah.
And it's all about the shift that occurred as I kind of have taken this journey of being a coach, is like, and where it started was like, I'm doing this for myself. No, I'm doing this for the collective to step into peak performance. Like that's what I truly, I love watching people just create their best life. Like
magic.
There's no better feeling than that. And if I look at any other coaching experience I've had, whether I was way back when I was coaching hockey as a young guy and watching a kid learn to skate, like I felt so freaking proud of that kid for learning how to skate. It's that same element, but on a larger scale when someone, you know, steps into creating their dream life.
Right. It's powerful, man. I'm really grateful that we finally got the opportunity to sit down. I don't think it'll be the last time, that's for sure, but I am very grateful. Hopefully we can do this in person sometime since you're only a province over. You're not that far from me, my friend.
Absolutely. Definitely.
More importantly, Shea, how can people support you in what you do? How can they become a client of yours? How can they just learn from your lived experience?
Absolutely. So I've recently made a free school community, SKOOL, but they can find all of the stuff that I do. The easiest place is on Instagram. It's Shea.Fairbanks, and that's SHEA Fairbanks. You can find me there. I'm also on TikTok, same Shea.Fairbanks. But Instagram is where you'll find me the most, and where all of my links and all that stuff's in there as well.
Amazing. I will make sure to put everything in the show notes so that people can come support you, because ultimately the people that support others are the ones that need it the most. And that is a reality we forget. So I'm really grateful that you gave us your time today and your wisdom. And I'm grateful for your experience, because without them, Shea, you would not be the man you are today. And I know the man that your father would be proud of. So I'm really grateful that you're here. I'm really grateful that you're sitting in what it means to be in this existence as a human being. And I'm just really honored to have had you on the show, my friend.
Thank you. I'm extremely grateful for myself, for this myself. So thank you.
You should be grateful for yourself. Fucking
And I am
right.
grateful
Say it
for
again.
myself, of course.
Goddamn right you are. I'm loving it. Amazing. Well, Shea, you stick with me. Everyone else,
Yeah.
we'll see you all next week.